Imagine a machine. You climb inside, they plug a wire into the back of your skull, and suddenly your life becomes perfect. Not Instagram perfect. Perfect in a way your nervous system can finally relax. You're loved the way you've always wanted to be loved. You're admired without having to beg for attention. You create things, you win, you matter. But here's the upgrade. Because this is 2026 and we don't do simplistic thought experiments anymore. This machine doesn't just give you pleasure, it gives you meaning. It gives you struggle, pain, setbacks, embarrassment, growth, the whole messy arc. It even gives you the bruises. It gives you the late nights and the near failures and the "I can't believe I did it" moments. You don't just feel happy, you feel like you earned it. So now the old moral flex, "I'd never choose fake happiness over reality," starts sounding suspiciously like something people say when they haven't suffered enough to consider the deal. Because let's be honest, if you've had a life where reality mostly meant bills, betrayal, chronic anxiety, and a quiet sense that you're wasting your one shot, then the question isn't, why would anyone plug in? The question is, why wouldn't you? And if your brain immediately shouted, because it wouldn't be real. Okay, define real without using the word real. Robert Nozick's original experience machine is famous because it exposes a crack in hedonism. If pleasure is the only good, why not plug into a machine that guarantees it forever? Most people say they wouldn't plug in, not because they're saints, because something in them recoils at the idea of being fooled. They say things like, "I want to actually do things. I want to be a certain kind of person. I want a connection to reality." But the original thought experiment is almost too polite. It assumes the machine is basically a pleasure drip. That's not how modern delusion works. Modern delusion is immersive. It has lore. It has trauma arcs. It has character development. It has earned victories. It can simulate the grit and the grind so convincingly that your ego walks out with a trophy and a story to tell. And that's the update. If the machine can simulate not only happiness, but also the feeling of authenticity, the struggle, the setbacks, the scars, then what exactly is reality still offering that the machine can't counterfeit? Because here's the uncomfortable thing. Most of what you call reality already reaches you through a simulation layer. Your senses are a filter. Your memory is a storyteller. Your attention is algorithmically herded. Your identity is an ongoing edit. You don't experience raw reality. You experience a curated narrative your brain constructs so you can keep functioning. So again, what are you defending when you defend reality? Before we go full matrix, look at how often we choose experience over truth right now. You post a photo, people react. Your brain receives a hit of social proof. You feel seen, even if nobody actually knows you. The emotion is real. The intimacy is questionable. And then you notice something disturbing. You start shaping your life toward what produces that feeling, not what nourishes you, what performs well. It's not that social media is fake. It's that it trains you to treat validation as reality because validation is measurable. And measurable is addictive. In a game, you grind, you struggle, you fail. You learn the boss pattern, you win. Your brain gets the emotional shape of accomplishment without the chaos of real life. And if you've ever looked up after a 6-hour session and felt an empty ache, you already know the punchline. The brain can be satisfied by a narrative it didn't actually live. Even darker, if a pill can reduce depression and anxiety, it can also raise the existential question. If my emotional suffering was partly chemistry, then what exactly was real about my despair? Does relief become fake because it was engineered? Or is real just what hurts? A lot of people quietly treat pain like proof of authenticity, as if suffering is the stamp that says this is the real version of you. And that's not wisdom, that's trauma theology. Most matrix discussions go like this. Would you take the blue pill or the red pill? And people love to posture. They love the identity of truth seeker. They love imagining themselves as Neo. But the darker angle is this. What if the red pill is just another story your ego tells to feel special? Because the ego doesn't just crave pleasure, it craves coherence. It craves being the main character of a consistent narrative that explains why you are the way you are. That's why people cling to conspiracies. That's why people cling to religions. That's why people cling to "I'm the victim," or "I'm the hero," or "I'm the misunderstood genius." Not because these stories are always false, but because the ego hates randomness. Randomness makes you feel powerless. and powerlessness feels like death. So you'd rather live in a painful story with a clean plot than in a reality that doesn't make sense. That's the twist nobody wants to admit. Sometimes we don't choose reality because it's true. We choose it because it maintains the continuity of the self, because it keeps the character consistent. Simulation theory has become this fashionable late-night thought. What if we're living in a simulation? People treat it like a party trick, like intellectual flirting. But if you take it seriously for 10 seconds, it becomes horrifying because it doesn't just question whether your world is real. It questions whether the category real matters at all. If your experience of life is always mediated through consciousness, and consciousness can be fed inputs, biological, digital, chemical, then reality becomes a preference, not a fact. And that's where Nozick's machine becomes a nightmare. Because once the machine can simulate meaning, once it can give you a sense of earned accomplishment, authentic struggle, genuine connection, then the only remaining reason to reject it is a principle. A value, a kind of loyalty. But loyalty to what? To truth? To some metaphysical real world? Or to the ego's desire to believe it's grounded in something solid? Because the ego wants to say, my story happened, it counts, it's anchored. Without that anchor, the ego has to face an unbearable possibility. Maybe nothing counts in the way it demands. Maybe the universe doesn't validate, it just unfolds, and you're just a mind trying to turn unfolding into a plot. Here's the moment where this gets personal. A lot of people reject the experience machine because they want to believe they're the kind of person who values authenticity. But look closer. Sometimes that rejection isn't about authenticity, it's about identity. It's about being able to say, I didn't take the easy way. It's about earning a moral badge. I suffer in the real world like a serious person. Because if someone else plugs in and becomes blissfully fulfilled in a simulated life, it forces an ugly question onto everyone outside. If they're content, and you're not, then what exactly are you doing this for? If you're choosing reality, but your reality is mostly numbness, resentment, and delayed living, then the virtue of reality starts to feel like a cope. And that's when people get angry, not at the machine, at the person who dares to ask whether reality is inherently better. Because that question threatens the ego's narrative. I'm in pain, therefore I'm noble. That's a very seductive story, and it's also a prison. The traditional argument goes, hedonism is shallow, reality is noble. But the updated machine blurs everything. So maybe the real conflict is different. In the machine, you surrender control of the source of your experience. In reality, you at least get to believe your experience is caused by the world, even if that belief is shaky. Reality gives the ego a scapegoat and a stage. The machine gives the ego a mirror. Because if your fulfillment is generated, then you can't keep pretending it came from the external world. You can't keep bargaining with once I get X, then I'll finally feel Y. The machine exposes how much of life is internal construction. And that's terrifying, because if feelings can be engineered, then your misery was never fated. It was a pattern, a wiring, a narrative, and now you're responsible for changing it. A lot of people would rather suffer than face that. Suffering feels like innocence. Let's not do the edgy nothing matters routine. If we're going to ask the question, we should answer it without hiding behind poetry. If the machine can simulate happiness, accomplishment, struggle, pain, and growth, why choose reality? Here are 3 reasons that actually hold weight, if they're your reasons, not inherited slogans. In a machine, the world is ultimately responsive to your arc. Even if it simulates resistance, it's still authored. Reality has a feature simulations struggle to replicate: indifference, not cruelty, indifference. A tree doesn't care if you're having character development. A stranger doesn't care if you're learning a lesson. The universe doesn't arrange itself around your redemption. If you value the rawness of that, if you value being shaped by something that doesn't cater to your narrative, then reality offers a kind of brutal honesty. Not moral honesty, ontological honesty. This one matters: connection. A simulated partner can feel real. A simulated friend can feel real. The emotions inside you will be real. But if you care about the independent existence of others, about their unpredictability, their agency, their ability to surprise you in ways no author would, then reality offers something irreplaceable. The possibility that you're not alone in your head. Even if that possibility comes with rejection and disappointment. The machine offers a kind of guaranteed satisfaction, Reality offers freedom, but freedom is messy. If your values include the ability to fail without narrative protection, to choose without a safety net, to build meaning without a built-in algorithm optimizing your happiness, then reality is the only place that demands that kind of courage. Not the Instagram courage, the quiet one, the kind where nobody claps. Now the practical part, because if we end here, we've just created a prettier existential crisis. Here are 3 psychological shifts, small, usable, that help you not get swallowed by this question. Ask yourself honestly, do I want truth, or do I want a story where I make sense? Because those are not always the same. Sometimes you chase reality because it preserves your identity as a struggler, a survivor, a misunderstood genius, the responsible one. And that identity can be more addictive than pleasure. If your authenticity requires you to keep suffering to stay coherent, it's not authenticity, it's brand management. A lot of people fear plugging into anything, joy, love, ease, because it feels fake, like they didn't earn it. But pleasure isn't evidence that your life is meaningless. Pleasure is just your nervous system signaling safety or alignment. You don't worship it and you don't shame it. You interrogate it gently. What is this trying to tell me? Because the goal isn't to avoid being manipulated by a machine. The goal is to stop being manipulated by your own reflexive guilt. This is the most grounded way out. Stop treating reality as a binary. Most of your life already involves machines of a sort. Music that changes your mood, stories that give you meaning, therapy that reframes your past, routines that stabilize your mind. The question isn't machine or reality. It's what kinds of constructed experiences serve my values and which ones serve my avoidance. Use the constructed experiences as tools, not as replacements. A game can restore agency. A story can remind you of hope. A meditation app can lower the static. But if you're using any of them to avoid making a difficult real-world choice, leaving the toxic job, ending the dead relationship, facing the loneliness, then it becomes a private simulation. And your life becomes a waiting room. So let's land this like we mean it. If fake pain feels real, if fake accomplishment feels earned, if fake love makes your chest warm the same way real love does, then reality isn't automatically superior. It's just the environment where your ego insists the story must take place. So here's the question I want you to answer in the comments, and don't be cute about it. If you could press a button and receive a life that feels meaningful, struggle and all, without the risk of failure, would you do it? Or is your loyalty to reality really just loyalty to being the kind of person who can say, I suffered for this? And the second question, worse because it's quieter. How much of your current authentic life is actually just you protecting a narrative that keeps your ego continuous, even if it keeps you miserable?